You monster, tell them where you hid her. My sister Olivia screamed as the SWAT team dragged me out in handcuffs, and I couldn't understand why. Just 24 hours ago, she was begging me to hide her daughter. Now she was accusing me of kidnapping my niece. My heart pounded, the shock setting in. How had things spiraled so quickly? The betrayal hit harder than the cold metal of the cuffs, and I was left wondering how everything I knew had turned into a nightmare. It started exactly 24 hours before the raid on a quiet afternoon at my cabin in the Smoky Mountains. The cabin, bought with the advance from my last book, was meant to be my escape. It was supposed to be a sanctuary where the chaos of my family couldn't reach me. The only sounds were the wind rustling through the pines and the scratch of my pen on paper. I was in my zone, wrapped up in writing, when my phone rang. It was Olivia. My stomach instantly tightened, the familiar dread sinking deep into my gut. I almost didn't pick up. I should have let it go to voicemail, but I didn't. The conditioning ran deep. No matter how much time had passed, no matter how many boundaries I set, I always answered for her. She was my sister, after all. I didn't think it would be any different this time, but I was wrong. Ashley, thank God you picked up. Olivia's voice came through the receiver, jagged with panic. My heart skipped a beat. I'd heard that tone before, the pitch that could only come from someone in full-blown crisis. She was breathing heavily, almost frantic. It's Brandon. He collapsed. They think it's a heart attack. I'm following the ambulance to the hospital. I felt a chill run down my spine. Brandon, her husband, was 34. Ran marathons, was in peak health. He wasn't some fragile old man. The idea that he could have a heart attack was already a stretch. But I didn't voice that. I listened like I always did as she spoke, barely catching her breath. I can't, she broke off, her voice cracking. I can't have Isabella see him like this. You have to take her, please. You're the only one I trust. The request hung in the air, illogical and frantic. Why on earth would she drive 2 hours into the mountains where I lived, in complete isolation, to drop off her 8-year-old daughter? Why wouldn't she just call a neighbor, a friend, someone she actually spoke to on a regular basis? I had been a convenient stranger for her before, but this felt different. There was no reason to drop Isabella off at my place, not when Brandon was supposedly so ill. But panic is contagious, and Olivia was patient zero. I could hear it in her voice, the urgency, the fear. It felt like she was speaking in one breath, without stopping to think. I knew she was in full-on survival mode, and when Olivia was like this, reason had no place in her world. I should have questioned her, pressed her for answers, but I didn't. I always said yes. I always did, even when it didn't make sense. It wasn't until later, when I replayed it in my head, that I realized how full of holes her logic was. She wanted me to take Isabella, but there was no logical explanation as to why. Brandon was fine, or so I thought, but I didn't question her. I didn't stop to analyze the inconsistencies. I just said, yes. 2 hours later, the black SUV tore up my gravel driveway. Olivia was out of the car before it even fully stopped, not looking like a grieving wife, but like someone running from a crime scene. She was pristine as always, her designer dress still spotless despite the alleged chaos she'd just witnessed. But her eyes were wild, darting around, avoiding mine. She didn't seem concerned about Brandon at all. She seemed more concerned about making sure Isabella wasn't seen. Her hands were shaking as she pulled my niece from the back seat. Isabella didn't look at me. She just stared down at her shoes, her shoulders hunched. It was July, the heat clinging to everything in the air. Yet she was wearing a thick, long-sleeved hoodie pulled tight around her face. Her face was a mask, but it didn't hide everything. I reached out to take Isabella's hand and she flinched. A sharp, violent jerk of her shoulder, like she was expecting a blow. That was when I saw it, the bruise on her wrist, barely peeking out from the sleeve of her hoodie. It wasn't the kind of bruise you get from a playground fall. It was the deep purple mark of fingers wrapped around her tiny wrist. I wanted to ask her about it right then and there, but I didn't. The question died in my throat. I told myself it wasn't my place. Not yet. And here's the part that kills me, the part that haunts me. I should have done something. I should have called Brandon myself. I should have demanded answers. I should have seen that bruise for what it was and confronted Olivia. But I didn't. Because for 28 years, I had been conditioned to be the family's fixer. I had taken the blame for Olivia's messes before, when she wrecked her car in high school, when she stole money from our parents. I covered up everything quietly to keep the peace. But this time, I didn't just fix things. I ignored what was right in front of me. Olivia knew exactly what she was doing. She played me like a puppet, knowing I would fall into my role and clean up the mess. She told me Isabella couldn't have sugar, couldn't use the phone, that she was in shock, and I followed her orders. I took Isabella inside, made her hot chocolate, locked the door behind us. I thought I was keeping the world out, but I had just locked myself inside the very thing that would destroy me. It's like I was under some sort of spell. I didn't ask questions. I didn't confront Olivia. I didn't even question why a child was in my house, dressed like she was preparing for a storm, bruised and broken. I didn't realize it then, but I had already taken the first step into a nightmare I couldn't escape from. It was happening again. Olivia's chaos had sucked me back in, and once again, I was the one who had to clean it all up. When I saw the bruise on Isabella's wrist, it was like a punch to the gut. The purple mark was almost hidden by her sleeve, but there was no mistaking it. I wanted to ask her about it, to demand answers, but I didn't. I stood there frozen, staring at the bruise. I could feel my chest tightening as the reality of what I was seeing began to sink in. It wasn't just a scrape. It wasn't just a minor injury from playing too hard. It was the kind of mark that said something much darker, something far worse. But instead of confronting it, I did nothing. I wanted to ask her where it came from, but I didn't. I wanted to pull her into my arms and make everything right, but I didn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure what I was allowed to do. I wasn't sure how I could change the course of events that were already unfolding, already spinning out of control. What I was sure of, though, was the deep, almost automatic need to avoid conflict. I had lived with it for years. When you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early on that peace doesn't come easily. It's not something you're allowed to simply have. It's something you have to manage, something you have to create, or else the world feels like it will come crashing down. And the easiest way to manage it was to fix things, to smooth things over, to make everything look okay on the surface, even if nothing underneath was right. And so that's what I did. I ignored the bruise. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask any questions. I just focused on what I knew I had to make things better no matter the cost. Isabella was in my house. She was here. And that meant it was my job to take care of her. It wasn't about asking why she had a bruise. It wasn't about challenging Olivia. It was about keeping the peace. That was my role in this family. I wasn't supposed to ask the hard questions. I wasn't supposed to rock the boat. I was supposed to clean up messes. It wasn't the first time I had ignored something for the sake of peace. I had been doing it my whole life. I had been Olivia's fixer for as long as I could remember. I had been the one to sweep things under the rug when she made mistakes. I had been the one to cover for her when she hurt people, when she hurt me. I was always the one who took the blame, who carried the burden. It was a pattern that had been set long before I ever understood what it meant. It was a survival mechanism, and it had worked for years. I was the peacekeeper, the one who made things right, who kept the family from falling apart. And the easiest way to do that was to ignore the ugly truths, to pretend things weren't as bad as they seemed. So when I saw Isabella's bruise, I pushed it aside. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. She had probably fallen. She was always clumsy, wasn't she? Olivia was probably just stressed. She was always so high-strung, so on edge. I told myself that, and I believed it. I told myself that everything would be okay if I just took care of Isabella, if I just made her feel safe. I didn't ask questions because asking them would only make things worse. I had learned that the hard way. If I pushed too hard, if I questioned too much, the storm would come and it would be worse than anything I could imagine. So I did what I always did. I smiled. I made her hot chocolate. I took her inside and locked the door, keeping the world at bay. And I kept my silence. But even as I went through the motions, something inside me stirred. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but there was a feeling gnawing at the edges of my mind. A feeling that I was letting something slip through my fingers. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it. I was playing the role I had always played. I was the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who swept the broken pieces away and made everything look okay. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't sure if my role would be enough. It wasn't just that I was worried about Isabella. It was that I was beginning to question everything I had accepted. I was beginning to see the cracks in the foundation of my life, in the way I had been living for so long. I had always been the one who cleaned up the messes, the one who made things right. But now standing there with Isabella, I was starting to realize something. I was starting to realize that maybe I wasn't the one who should be fixing things anymore. Maybe it was time for me to stop pretending that everything was okay. Maybe it was time to stop ignoring the things that scared me. Maybe it was time to stop playing the role of the family's scapegoat, the one who took the blame for everything, the one who always said yes when she should have said no. I didn't realize it then, not fully, but that moment with Isabella, the bruise, the silence, the ignoring of what was right in front of me, marked the beginning of something else. It marked the beginning of my breaking point. I had been living for so long as the fixer, the one who made everything look perfect, that I had lost myself in the process. But standing there, holding Isabella's trembling hand, I realized I couldn't keep doing it anymore. I couldn't keep ignoring the truth, not when it was staring me in the face. The role I had been playing for so many years wasn't going to save me anymore. And it wasn't going to save Isabella either. And that in that fleeting moment of clarity is when I finally understood. I couldn't be the fixer anymore. I had to stop playing the part that had kept me trapped for so long. The moment the accusations started, everything I knew about myself, everything I had ever believed, began to unravel. I had always been the family's scapegoat, the one who took the blame, the one who cleaned up everyone else's mess. I had learned to live in the shadows of Olivia's chaos, to be the silent fixer. But now, I was no longer in the background. I was at the center of the storm. The roles had reversed, and suddenly I was the villain. The family I had worked so hard to keep intact, the family I had spent years trying to protect, was now turning on me, condemning me without question. As the messages from my parents came in condemning me, calling me a monster, a part of me, wanted to scream out, to explain, to tell them that I hadn't done anything. But the words felt hollow before they even left my mouth. I wasn't sure if they would believe me. They had never truly believed me before. For so long I had been the invisible one, the one who took the fall for everything Olivia did. Every mistake, every bad choice. I was the one who fixed it. And now I was trapped in the same role, except this time I couldn't fix it. This time, I was the one being accused. The police arrived, barging in with their flashing lights and shouting orders, and I didn't fight. I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by the weight of it all. The detective's words were like a distant hum in my ears as they read out the charges, as they told me what I had supposedly done. Aggravated kidnapping, extortion, child abuse. I couldn't make sense of it. I had never done any of those things. But the evidence, the deepfake recording, it all pointed to me. And in that moment, I felt it, the seed of doubt. I had spent so many years being told my reality wasn't real, being told my feelings didn't matter, being told I was the problem. I had been gaslighted so thoroughly that for a moment I wondered if maybe I had done it. Maybe I had blocked it out. Maybe I had forgotten. That's what it felt like, this overwhelming sense of helplessness. The walls were closing in on me and I couldn't escape. It wasn't just the false accusations. It was the way my entire family had abandoned me, how quickly they had turned their backs. My parents didn't ask questions. They didn't look for the truth. They just believed Olivia. They always believed Olivia. For 30 years, I had been the one who was wrong, the one who was broken, the one who had to fix everything. And now, when I needed them to believe me, when I needed them to see that I was innocent, they condemned me without hesitation. I was no longer the fixer. I was the problem. As I sat there, handcuffed, staring at the detective, I realized how deeply ingrained my role in the family was. For years, I'd been taught to shrink, to silence myself, to apologize for things I didn't do, to clean up messes that weren't mine to clean. I had been trained to accept my place, to take the blame, to believe that if I just fixed things, everything would be okay. But now, there was no fixing it. I was being torn apart by the very people I had spent my life trying to hold together. And in that moment, as a detective played the recording of my voice, the familiar rasp, the cadence, the way I spoke, when I was tired, I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that wasn't me, that I had never said those words. But I couldn't. The words caught in my throat. I wanted to fight back, to demand the truth, to say I was innocent. But I had been silenced for so long, I didn't even know how to fight anymore. My body went limp. As the false truth sank in, I didn't fight. I just let them drag me out. This was the power of abuse, I realized. It didn't just hurt you, it made you doubt yourself. It made you question your own reality. It made you feel like you were guilty even when you knew you weren't. That was the true torture. Not the accusations, not the police, but the way they made me question my own mind. They had broken me down so completely that for a brief moment, I wondered if I had actually done it. If I had made all of it up. If I had become the villain I had always been accused of being. As the detective continued to lay out the evidence in front of me, something began to click. The photos, the transcripts, the deep fake recording, all of it had felt like an overwhelming tidal wave of guilt and confusion. But as I stared at the images on the table, something in my mind started to shift. The bruise on Isabella's wrist, the weird inconsistencies in Olivia's behavior, it was all starting to come together. Olivia had framed me. She hadn't just used me as a scapegoat for some petty reason. No, this was calculated. She had orchestrated this whole thing to cover her own tracks. The ransom money, $500,000. It wasn't random. It was exactly the amount of debt Olivia had racked up gambling online last year. I remembered that conversation so clearly. She had asked me for $10,000 to cover the interest on a loan. I had given it to her like a fool, believing she was struggling. But now I saw it for what it was, a part of her plan to extort her own husband. The realization hit me hard. Olivia hadn't just framed me to take the fall for her. She was using me to extort money from Brandon. She had told him that I had taken Isabella, demanded the ransom, and planned to pay me off, keeping the cash for herself while I rotted in prison. She was manipulating everyone, the police, my family, and even me. She had used my role as the family fixer against me. She knew I would take the blame, that I would clean up her mess. And I had. I could feel my pulse quicken as the truth sank in. It wasn't just the evidence that had cracked everything wide open. It was the clarity that was finally flooding my mind. Olivia wasn't the victim. She wasn't the innocent, misunderstood soul I had always tried to protect. She was a liar, a manipulator, a criminal, and she had used me to further her own selfish agenda. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just a pawn in her game. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I was the one who could expose the truth. The inner strength I had buried so deep for so long was starting to rise. It wasn't too late. I could still fight back. And for the first time, I realized I didn't have to play the role she had given me. I could be something else, someone who fought for the truth. The final confrontation came like a storm. As the detective presented the new evidence, Kyle's video of Olivia, doctoring Isabella's bruises and coaching her to lie, it was as if the ground shifted beneath us. I watched Olivia's face change, the confidence she had worn like armor suddenly slipping away. Her carefully constructed facade, the lies she had built around herself for so long, crumbled in an instant. She tried to deny it, of course. She screamed that it was all fake, that it wasn't real. But the timestamps, the metadata, the clarity of Kyle's footage, it was undeniable. She had manipulated everyone, and now it was all coming undone. For the first time, I stood tall, my heart steady as I looked around the room. I had spent so many years being told I was the problem, that I was the one who needed to be fixed. But now the truth was out. I was not the villain. Olivia was. As the police moved to arrest her, I felt a strange sense of release. It wasn't just the satisfaction of seeing Olivia finally face the consequences of her actions. It was the freedom that came with no longer carrying her weight. My family, who had believed her for so long, sat in stunned silence. My mother's face was pale, my father's eyes wide with disbelief. They had seen the truth, but they hadn't protected me. I knew things would never be the same between us. And that was okay. Olivia's arrest was just the beginning of my own healing. For the first time in my life, I was free from her, free from the chains of her manipulation. I had reclaimed my life, and for the first time, I felt like I was finally living on my terms. A year later, I found peace in the Smoky Mountains with Isabella. She's thriving, safe, loud, unafraid. I used the settlement to build an art therapy center for children recovering from narcissistic abuse. And it's become my mission to help others who faced manipulation and gaslighting. This journey taught me that healing isn't just about justice, it's about reclaiming your life. If you've ever felt trapped, know you're not alone. Share this story and remember, justice is what we build after the storm.